Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms says Pastor James Coates of Grace Life Church may be released from jail on Friday. The federal Conservatives are concerned about the proposed Rogers takeover of Shaw Communications. We will explain why. And we hear from political reporter Brian Lilly, who has an update as to when the Canada-US border may potentially reopen.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The Alberta government announced today that it is investing another $50 million to improve rural health facilities. The province says that will include emergency departments, EMS stations, pharmacies, and medical laboratories. Health Minister Tyler Shandro says priority projects have been identified in all 5 health zones and will move forward within the next 3 years. That includes $1.5 million towards upgrades at the Crow's Nest Pass Health Centre, $1.6 million to the Brooks Health Centre, $1.5 million to the Cardston Health Centre, and $250,000 to improve the emergency department triage area in Taber. Minister Shandro says the renovations and improvements will create around 280 new construction jobs. The province also announced funding to strengthen elder abuse prevention and intervention. The $750,000 investment over 2 years will go to the Alberta Elder Abuse Awareness Council. The money will be used to increase support for seniors affected by elder abuse, explore an approach to data collection, and to enhance the skills of responders. Officials say funding will also enable the council to provide enhanced elder abuse awareness training for service providers and responders. This is the 3rd day in a row that there have been no COVID-19 related deaths at any long-term care facilities in Alberta. Our province's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dina Henshaw, says a lot of that is attributed to vaccine distribution.
It's very encouraging to see the downward trend, and I think that it absolutely shows us the powerful impact that vaccination has had on long-term care residents, both in minimizing the chances of infection as well as preventing deaths. It is also important to note that the individuals who live in long-term care are not the only ones at risk. And we do sadly continue to see deaths occurring in individuals who live in the community, who are at high risk, which is exactly why we need to hold on just a little bit longer to make sure we have the opportunity to provide immunization to all those who are of older age or who have chronic conditions before we make any changes that might put people at risk of being exposed.
Pastor James Coates of Grace Life Church near Edmonton is expected to be released from jail over the next few days. The Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms announced that the Crown has agreed to withdraw all but one of the Public Health Act offences that Pastor Coates was charged with. Joining me now from Calgary to discuss this in more detail is John Carpe, president of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. John, which charges were withdrawn and which one remains?
The Crown has withdrawn the charge of failing to comply with an undertaking, and they've withdrawn one of the 2 charges of violating a health order. And there's going to be a hearing on Friday, and Pastor Coates will plead guilty to one of the violating a health order charge, and there'll be a proposal to the court that he pay a $100 fine.
Now, Pastor Coates has been in jail since February 16th. Do you anticipate his release to be on Friday?
Hopefully by this Friday, March the 19th, we hope that he will be free by then. It's about 99% sure, but you know, it's not over until we get the approval from the judge.
His trial for breaking public health orders hosting full church services is coming up May 3rd through the 5th. John, explain what your defense will look like.
It's not just Pastor Coates that's on trial for charged with failing to comply with the health orders, but it's the health orders themselves that will be on trial, and they stand accused of violating our charter rights and freedoms. And the onus will be on the government for the first time ever to produce the science, produce the evidence, to persuade the court that lockdowns were truly necessary, that they are effective, that they're working, and that they're actually doing more good than harm. These are all points that the government will have to prove in court. And I'm looking forward to the trial, because up till now, governments have had it easy. They get easy questions from biased pro-lockdown media, And but in court, they will have to actually come up with evidence to support their position.
That was John Carpe, president of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, joining me from Calgary. Lethbridge police are investigating the death of a male who was found in an alley of the 100 block of 16th Street North. Police say he was discovered unconscious around 1 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. He was then transported to Chinook Regional Hospital and then via Stars Air ambulance to Calgary, where he later died. An investigation into the cause of death is underway. An autopsy is scheduled for Thursday in Calgary. Fort Macleod RCMP and Lethbridge police were called out to the hamlet of Grantham last night with the execution of an arrest warrant. When they arrived, the wanted male barricaded himself inside of a home. The RCMP emergency response team was brought in, as were the Blood Tribe police. 2 men were taken into custody. One male was the subject of the arrest warrant, and the other was found to have an outstanding warrant. Both remain in custody, and court dates are pending. Today is St. Patrick's Day. Now, many people associate St. Paddy's Day with drinking a little bit of green beer. Now, that often leads to the potential of getting behind the wheel of a vehicle while impaired. Anita Huchala with Mothers Against Drunk Driving says, sadly, it's not just alcohol these days, but many times drivers are also impaired by opioids, which are just as equally dangerous.
One of the firmest statements I can say is impaired. Whether you're taking the alcohol, whether you're taking the drugs, or even prescription drugs, we are seeing a rise at times in different age brackets of people who are prescribed opioids, whether it be from a surgery or a lengthy illness that they're dealing with and stuff, and they take that and then choose to get behind the wheel without realizing how impaired they may be.
Anita Huchala from MAD will also discuss how the percentage of women caught driving while impaired is going up. That interview is coming up later in our broadcast. During a walk around his block in Lethbridge, Will Woods was struck by how many discarded gloves and masks he saw. The Lethbridge tattoo artist decided to track the waste he saw with pictures on Facebook, and the result was shocking. Loris Alexander has the details.
One day I was coming to work and I saw a bunch of them on a corner and I had a no-show, so I decided to go pick them up. And that kind of got me thinking, you know what, maybe today I'm going to walk home. And I decided to walk home and pick up a few.
A few turned into 112 in an 8-block range. It didn't end there. Woods posted to Facebook and ended up collecting more masks with the help of other people.
There was a lot of support, and a few of us, there's 5 of us in total. We went out for a Saturday for 3 hours, maybe 3.5 hours, and that's when we picked up 1,253 masks. So, I mean, everyone says, you know, well, it can't be that bad, but I mean, obviously it is that bad. And I mean, in 3 hours, 5 of us, I'd like to see what 50 of us could do in 3 hours.
Woods says this has nothing to do with a political stance on masks, and wherever you stand on the COVID spectrum, just be aware that you aren't adding to the already growing environmental hazard.
This goes beyond masks. This isn't a mask thing. This isn't an anti-mask thing. This is a do the right thing. And maybe you do need to pick up your mask. I see people drop them all the time. I see people throw them all the time. And this just isn't homeless, isn't this person your neighbor. This is everybody. I mean, if it was a $5 bill, you'd chase that damn thing down the road. But it's a mask and you let it go and you're like, oh, you know, that's somebody else's problem. You're right, it is somebody else's problem. It's going to be my problem because I'm going to go around and pick these things up.
Woods is hosting another community mask cleanup on Sunday, March 28th at 12 p.m. For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
Veterans in our city are receiving more recognition. The Last Post Fund has installed temporary signage for veterans who are approved for a new headstone. As Micah Quinn explains, the initiative recognizes veterans who've never had a headstone before and are now being honored.
In 1996, the Last Post Fund created the Unmarked Grave Program to make sure that all veterans' graves receive a military marker. Nearly 3,500 graves have been marked since the program started.
Lest we forget, and in many cases it has been forgotten for whatever reason. So it's a small step to fix that, honor that, and preserve it moving forward. And that's part of our motto with the Last Post Fund, and all our stones on the very bottom, lest we forget, is also inscribed.
Miller is a veteran himself, and he says that there is always a positive reaction from family members when they see these new headstones.
And again, we don't judge why. A lot of the deaths from the dirty 30s, for example, a lot of people were poor. And then it just has gone on and gotten forgotten about. So we don't judge for whatever reason. We just want to solve and honor these veterans with a military marker.
9 new headstones will be installed in the Mountain View Cemetery in Lethbridge, and one of those headstones will be installed for John Lothar, who served in the First World War.
He was 24 when he enlisted in 1918, and he was just a tiny person. He was 5'2". So it didn't matter if you were huge or tiny. These people were willing to fight for our country.
To become a volunteer, or if residents have seen any unmarked graves, they can call the Last Post Fund National Office. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Seniors in our community were able to sit down and enjoy a recorded concert recently. The Sakamoto Agency started an initiative where they book artists to play pre-recorded concerts to care homes across the country. The idea was to inspire seniors who felt isolated during the pandemic. In Lethbridge, the Edith Cavell Care Centre showcased the recent concert. The promotions manager for the agency says the shows have been a huge hit.
You know, it's great to know that they are feeling rewarded and entertained and having a good time, sort of lets them forget about the bad stuff for a little while. But it's also been so rewarding for us too, because we don't have that satisfaction of booking shows and knowing that an audience showed up and really enjoyed it, and that we entertained a lot of people, but we're now getting that back. So it sort of keeps us going as much as it keeps them going. It's beneficial for both ends.
The agency was originally approached by a care home in Medicine Hat to start the idea of having the concerts. The City of Lethbridge announced that more pool activities began today. Both Nicholas Sharon and Stan Civic Pool are now offering therapy swimming, aqua stretching, and water walking. Masks are still mandatory in each facility, including in the pools. Face shields are not permitted, and if you'd like to register, you'll have to call each pool since online booking is not available. In addition to hosting local vendors at the Farmers Market, officials at the NMAC Centre said they've entered into a new partnership with the Sterling-based Hickory Street Barbecue. The restaurant will serve as the official pitmaster at both farmers markets, and that will include a new outdoor experience during the Saturday markets.
We're super excited about our partnership with Exhibition Park. We have been announced as the official pitmaster of Lethbridge Farmers Market. So we're excited. It's a great opportunity. Lots of people in and out of there, and just more opportunity to spread awesome food to Southern Alberta. At any of the events and things like that, there will be a spot for us inside Exhibition Park where we can share knowledge, share tips, things like that. We're super excited about that learning piece of things, because we know lots of people have smokers in their backyards and sometimes they're just not sure how to use it, but I love sharing that information with people.
The Farmers Market in the North Pavilion of Exhibition Park begins on May the 8th. A 17-year-old student who died after being stabbed at her school is being remembered as a girl who had a big heart, a heart of gold. Dylan Poutney, who was 19, is being charged with first-degree murder in the death of Jennifer Winkler. Police say she was assaulted on Monday in a classroom at Christ the King School in Leduc, just south of Edmonton. Mounties have said that Winkler and Poutney knew each other. A friend of Poutney says he was Winkler's stepbrother. The Regina area will not be joining the rest of the province when capacity restrictions on worship services are eased on Friday. The Saskatchewan Health Ministry says a cap of 30 people will remain in place until at least April 5th in the region due to rising cases of COVID-19 variants. The province reported 66 new confirmed cases of variants, mostly in and around the capital city. It also announced 156 new cases of COVID-19, along with 2 more deaths associated with the virus. Members of a congregation in Morden, Manitoba were thankful when off-duty police officers helped arrest a man with a gun during a Sunday service. Police were called to the Westside Community Church after a man began making a disturbance. The off-duty officers who were attending the service pulled the fire alarm to get everyone outside, including the gunman. Police then had the man arrested, and seized what turned out to be a replica firearm. Dustin Workington is charged with numerous weapon, assault, and disturbance charges. Conservative MP Pierre Poilievre says the Tories will trigger hearings on Rogers' proposed deal to buy Shaw Communications. He says the deal must come with conditions.
Those communities lacking affordable, high-speed internet will be at a massive, insurmountable disadvantage. That's why it's absolutely essential that those communities and all Canadians have access to high-speed, affordable internet. Now, normally, the free market system forces companies to compete for workers with better wages and compete for customers with better prices and products. But we don't have a free market in telecommunications. We have a protected, regulated oligarchy. A small group of players who are protected by a regulatory regime, largely controlled out of Ottawa, serve our population. Now, let's be honest, this model has not particularly performed well.
Shootings at 2 massage parlors in Atlanta, Georgia left 8 people dead on Tuesday night. Police say many of them were women of Asian descent. A 21-year-old man was taken into custody in southwest Georgia. Police described the carnage which took place at one of the locations.
Our deputies responded to this massage parlor here on Highway 92, just west of Bells Ferry Road, to a multiple people shot call. They got here, determined that, in fact, multiple people had been shot. So we are now dealing with 4 deceased and 1 injured. The suspect was identified as Robert Aaron Long, 21 years old, lives in unincorporated Cherokee County. We put out his image to the assignment desk a little while ago. I'm not sure if everyone got it or not, but he is currently in custody in Crisp County. We've been communicating with them. My understanding they did a pit maneuver on him and took him into custody, as far as I know, without incident.
This is the 10th anniversary of the first demonstrations which sparked the Syrian civil war. Now, during that period of time, the Christian population decreased from 2 million to just 700,000 people. As we hear in this next report, Open Doors has been standing with believers in Syria and helping them to try and rebuild their lives.
The war in Syria started in 2011. As others around him began to flee the country, a recently ordained pastor called Abdallah was unexpectedly put in charge of the Alliance Church in Aleppo. He was married with a daughter called Camelia, aged 6, and a son, Joseph, who was 3 years old. By 2012, displaced people fleeing the war and seeking safety started to arrive at Pastor Abdallah's church. But for the next few years, the Battle of Aleppo intensified, resulting in mass destruction and huge loss of life in the city. There was no electricity, no running fresh water, food was scarce, and hope was fading. Many decided to leave the country. In Pastor Abdallah's church, his once thriving group of young adult leaders dwindled from over 60 to just 11. During periods of intense bombardment, Abdallah and his family resorted to hiding in the bathroom, the safest place in their home. A bomb fell on his daughter's school. 4 children were killed. Pastor Abdallah's church, supported by Open Doors, began to distribute food and emergency relief. At the height of the crisis, his church was helping 2,200 households each month. Since 2017, Open Doors established Centers of Hope in partnership with the local church. Throughout Syria, our church partners helped to set up small businesses, giving those who had lost jobs a way to make money and support their families. Today, the Center of Hope at the Alliance Church continues to provide food aid, hygiene kits, medical aid, rent support, discipleship groups, activities for children, youth ministries, help for students with their schoolwork.
We had an amazing day weather-wise here across southwestern Alberta for St. Patrick's Day, and hoping the warm weather will continue. It should for the next week or so. Full weather details are coming up shortly. It has been a beautiful St. Paddy's Day so far. Not sure if it's the luck of the Irish, but I've even witnessed a little more green popping out of the ground lately. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a complete look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, as luck would have it, we should be enjoying warm spring-like temperatures for quite some time.
Yeah, well, isn't that the truth? And I know exactly what you mean. It seems like just the other week we were shoveling our driveways and our walkways, and all of a sudden, lo and behold, we are having to rake away leaves and dead grass. So yeah, hopefully we'll be seeing a lot more green soon. Happy St. Patrick's Day to all of you. Hopefully you're wearing green. I am. It might not look like it on the screen, but it is actually a green dress, believe it or not. Now, we did have a beautiful day today in Lethbridge, high of 14 degrees. lots of sunshine. It was a bit gusty though with the winds, 30 to 50 kilometers per hour. That wind is going to keep going this evening up to about 40 kilometers per hour. 0 is our overnight low. Into tomorrow, a lovely 17 degrees, a bit of some gusty winds as well, up to 50K. Sunshine for our Thursday. Into Friday, mix of sun and cloud, a beautiful 16 degrees is expected. 12 degrees for both Saturday and Sunday with a mix of sun and cloud. And then 11 degrees expected for Monday and Tuesday with a mix of sun and cloud. Those overnight lows still in the minuses a little bit, giving us that wind chill factor. So it's that weird time of year where we're waking up still with frost on the windshield, having a little bit of that wind chill factor with the wind shield frost, and also some UV indexes in the middle of the day, so up to 3 and 4. So just, you know, that weird, odd time of year. By the way, first day of spring coming up this weekend, and so I'm so excited and looking forward to that. So we're well above the seasonal averages for this time of year. Average high 6 degrees, average low -6. 19 degrees was our high temperature in Lethbridge back in 2007 rather. I almost said 19. 1943 is when we had our chilliest day on record in Lethbridge, which was -29 degrees. 7:40 is when the sun rose this morning, and as you can see, we've got almost a 12-hour day of sunlight. So 7:39 this evening is when the sun will set, giving us just under 12 hours of daylight. A bit of a rainy one on the west coast tomorrow, both Victoria and Vancouver, sitting about 11 degrees, 12 degrees in Vancouver. Rain, windy also near the coast later on in the day. Sunshine across the rest of Alberta tomorrow, 14 the high in Edmonton, 15 in Calgary. A little bit windy as well, up to about 40 kilometers per hour. Over in the rest of the prairies, also experiencing sunshine as well. 6 degrees the high in Saskatoon, 8 for Regina, 10 degrees in Winnipeg. So get out your sunglasses if you're in the prairies. Still experiencing those wind chill factors as well. So just be aware of that. Not so sunny though in central Canada. Toronto experiencing shower activity tomorrow, 7 degrees the high, 5 the high in Ottawa with a mix of sun and cloud. Also showers expected right here in Montreal, 5 degrees is the high as well. So looking further east into Atlantic Canada, there is a special weather statement for several cities on the east coast, bringing in quite a bit of flurry activity starting Thursday night into Friday. Tomorrow in Fredericton, flurries mixed with showers, and then rounding out the day with showers, 7 degrees the high there. Halifax high 6 degrees, same thing for Charlottetown. Quite a bit of rain expected in these areas, and snow expected tomorrow in St. John's, Newfoundland with a high of 2 degrees. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
There is talk in Michigan about shutting down another major pipeline. This one is Enbridge's Line 5. Now, the difference with this pipeline, according to political reporter Brian Lilly, is that it will not only impact Alberta's oil and gas sector, but also have a major impact on those in Ontario, Quebec, and the United States.
People here don't even know that they get their oil from Line 5. They won't know until the pipeline is shut down, which could happen in May. And at that point, we don't need oil for heating our homes, but we will need it to drive our cars. So will we be able to get out of the city while we're still in lockdown? I'm sure we will be in Toronto come May. Will we be able to start our cars? Will there be gas? I don't know. Not if Gretchen Whitmer, the Michigan governor, has her way.
Catch the full interview with Mr. Lilly discussing the repercussions of potentially shutting down Enbridge's Line 5. That is coming up after business news. Federal Conservative jobs critic Pierre Poilievre says the proposed takeover of Shaw by Rogers Communications should not be allowed to proceed without safeguards for consumers and employees of the two companies. He wants the House of Commons to examine the deal. In announcing the deal, both companies committed to continue offering affordable wireless plans. Experts say the deal removes the best chance at a viable national fourth carrier. Stats Canada says there was an unexpected burst of entrepreneurship amid the economic havoc caused by the pandemic. The federal agency says the number of new business openings in November exceeded the number of business closures for the 5th month in a row. One analyst says that could include startups taking advantage of the so-called COVID economy, which includes cleaning services, homemade masks, online fitness, and delivery services. The union representing aviation industry workers says there's frustration that there's still no federal aid package a year after restrictions were increased on non-essential travel. Unifor National President Jerry Dias says nothing came out of the meetings between the union and the government officials over the last year. He says the scale of the layoffs in the airline sector is unsustainable and the possibility of travel to more remote areas in Canada is being threatened. Diaz also says the industry needs Ottawa to provide a plan for safely reopening the Canadian border. Ford has announced another 30,000 employees worldwide who have worked from home during the pandemic that they can continue to do so indefinitely. The automaker says their schedules will become a work-office hybrid with commutes to work mainly for group meetings and special projects. Ford's announcement set a clear signal about a cultural shift by erasing any stigma associated with remote work. A report this week from the employment website Indeed says jobs which mention remote work have more than doubled since the pandemic began. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 109 points on the day to finish at 18,983. The Dow was up 189 points to 33,015. The S&P 500 was up 11 points to 3974, and the Nasdaq was up 53 points on the day to finish at 13,525. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 36 cents to 64.44 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 4 cents to 252 US. Gold was down 20 cents to 17.4514 US an ounce, and silver was up 38 cents to 26.32 US an ounce. Wheat is at $306 per metric ton, barley's at $310, canola's at $7.84, and corn is at $341 per metric ton. Live cattle were up $1.23 to $119.43, feeder cattle were up 35 cents to $136.93, and lean hogs were up 78 cents to $93.68. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 80.60 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Pastor James Coates of Grace Life Church near Edmonton is expected to be released from jail potentially on Friday. The Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms announced that the Crown has agreed to withdraw all but one of the Public Health Act offenses that Pastor Coates was charged with. Pastor Coates has been in jail since February the 16th. His trial for breaking public health orders and hosting full church services runs May 3rd through the 5th. The Canada-U.S. border has been closed to all but essential travel for almost a year now. Our political reporter Brian Lilly recently spoke with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and asked when our border will reopen. The answer to that question is coming up shortly. The We Charity scandal is not going away anytime soon. We had 3 hours of testimony from the Kielburger brothers on the Canada's Student Service Grant Program. Now, to talk about this in more detail is Toronto Sun columnist and one of our regular contributors, Mr. Brian Lilly. Now, Brian, the brothers began the hearings by taking shots at all parties.
They really did, and it surprised me because they've been gentle in not doing that. They've taken a couple of shots at individual MPs, Charlie Angus from the New Democrats, Pierre Poilievre, Mike Barrett from the Conservatives, the ones that have been very effective in bringing up information or portraying things in a light that doesn't make the Kielburger brothers or We Charity look particularly good. But they opened by accusing Charlie Angus of lying to the public and posting online 101 lies Charlie Angus is told. They accused the Conservatives of running over the charity and accused the Liberals of using them as a political prop. So there were all they just took on each party systematically, which surprised me quite a bit. That didn't last too long. Everyone went back to their normal form. The Liberals playing defense for the entire situation of them giving an untendered contract to run a program originally announced at more than $912 billion. The Liberals played defense. They wanted to talk about how great we was, how great this program would have been, and the other parties were trying to find out, okay, was there something incorrect in how this was handled, including the issuance of the original contract.
AstraZeneca was approved by Health Canada a few weeks ago, but only for those under the age of 65. Brian, now the Vaccine Advisory Committee is changing their guides and said it's good for everyone. Tell me more.
Yeah, it's getting very confusing, and there's so much going on with AstraZeneca that, and we'll get to how other countries are treating it in a moment, but I'm starting to wonder and worry if this will cause confusion or worry for the public. Normally, the one thing that I don't like journalists doing, I don't like people going on TV and they're asked about something and they just say, oh, well, it's all so confusing. It's our job to explain difficult things to the public because we get access to politicians and policymakers and top bureaucrats, and we get to ask questions and say, okay, well, I'm confused about this, explain it to me, and then we turn around and whether it's in print and radio or TV, we relate the information that the public needs. So just saying it's confusing, I think is a cop-out. But this truly is. You had the National Advisory Committee on Immunization approve AstraZeneca in Canada at the same time as Health Canada. So Health Canada actually approves its use. NACI, the committee, says it should be used for people under 65. Health Canada said, no, it can be used for everybody, including those over 65. You had other countries saying we won't use it for over 65s. You had people saying it's not safe for people over 65, which is not true. Now, NACI has said, it's okay, you can use it over 65. We had some provinces saying we would use it, some saying we wouldn't. I know that, I've heard from a number of readers that they're concerned and they're unsure of what to do because you've got competing bodies at different times making different pronouncements and then other bodies changing their mind. That will sow confusion for the public. Look, I think AstraZeneca is safe. I think that the real world experience of its use in Britain shows that it is good for people over 65 and those under 65, and that it has worked and reduced hospitalizations and deaths, which are the two things that you're looking for in a vaccine. So a lot of politics, I think, involved in getting the committee to change its mind. But a lot of other factors going on here as well.
So let me ask you something. How closely are the Trudeau Liberals watching how many countries in Europe have temporarily suspended using the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine over fears of blood clotting? Brian, I mean, we're talking about France, Ireland, Germany, Norway, Iceland, the list goes on and on. They've all temporarily stopped using the vaccine over the concerns of damaging side effects.
Let me say that I think there's a lot of vaccine politics going on in all of this, in terms of the Trudeau government's response to concerns about clotting, but also the claims of the clotting itself. Most of the countries that are walking away from AstraZeneca were just a week or so ago clamoring to get some and making demands on Britain, where it's primarily made at the moment, to say, why are you hogging it for your population? There's a lot of vaccine politics going on here. These are EU countries who are falling behind in the pace of vaccinating their populations. And what does Britain have that they don't? Well, they've got AstraZeneca, which the EU countries had not been using. They can't get it in enough supply at the moment. So now they're saying, well, there's problems with blood clotting. You just wanted it. I understand that some people say there are concerns with blood clotting. Our health regulators insist that they are following this, that they do not see the issue. But also, to get to the politics on this side of the Atlantic, I don't think that the Trudeau government can afford to say we won't use AstraZeneca. This is one of the lifelines to speed up the vaccination process, because the Americans have now moved up to saying every adult has to be approved and able to start getting a vaccine by May 1st. The Brits are saying under 40s by Easter. And we're still saying, oh, are you over 80? Are you under 80? We're still at that phase in most of Canada. So, I don't think that the government can afford to say we're going to shelve one of the vaccines that we have, one of the few that we're going to be getting big numbers in the next little while, because they need to get this vaccination program going.
Now, last week, Canada received more than 1 million doses of vaccines, but this week, less than 450,000. Next week, another million. Why the inconsistency here? What's going on?
So last week, it was a combination of 3 different vaccines. We had our regular shipment of Pfizer, which has now grown and is back up at around 450,000 last week. We had the 500,000 doses of the Covishield Verity. That's the version of AstraZeneca made in India at the Indian Serum Institute. And then we had a couple 100,000 doses of Moderna. Moderna only ships once every 3 weeks. The AstraZeneca was, in some ways, a surprise, a pleasant one, but a surprise. So we bounced over 1 million doses in a week for the first time. Remember, the Americans use 1 million doses by lunch every day. We are thankful to get 1 million doses for the week. This week, we're only getting our regular shipment of AstraZeneca, which I believe is 444,000 and change. So we're all the way back down again. So it is inconsistent. Next week, we will go over 1 million of Pfizer. We won't get any Moderna, and we're not sure about AstraZeneca, but I've been told stay tuned. More could be showing up as these other countries start rejecting it. We could end up picking up doses that are now on the market again. So it becomes very difficult. And I keep saying that there's politics involved in this. The premiers say give us vaccines, and then you've got a bunch of Liberal MPs out complaining publicly or in letters and stoking on their followers on places like Twitter to say, oh, why does Jason Kenney or why does Doug Ford have so many vaccines in freezers? Well, when you get 500,000 at once, it's going to take you some time to get through them. And when you know that that's going to be cut in half the next week, you don't want to use them all up at once. You don't want to ramp up your vaccination program so high and then just lay off a bunch of nurses that you've just hired because, well, you ran out of vaccine supply in 2 or 3 days. The provinces are trying to manage this at the moment, keep their system running at a high enough level that it doesn't shrivel down the way it did at the beginning of February, but they're trying to balance things out. That's where it's at right now.
It's almost been a year since Prime Minister Justin Trudeau closed the Canada-US border to everything but essential travel. He was asked this week if it's time to finally reopen. What did he have to say?
Yeah, I believe it was just a couple of days ago that he is the anniversary of when he closed everything but the U.S. In a couple of days from now, it'll be the year anniversary of the U.S. It was about a week apart, if you remember. At first, we were going to close everything but the U.S., and he said, well, it's too difficult to close the U.S. border. And then suddenly said, okay, we better close the U.S. border. He said, not now. He said, maybe one day, but not now. I don't know when that one day is going to be. I've long had the suspicion that they would wait until after spring break and after Easter before doing that. You know, the colleges and universities, they've had their spring break time. I'm sure some people went south. I mean, I can look at the number of people flying from Calgary to Cancun on a regular basis. I know Canadians are going south to different places, but it's in diminished numbers. And those Canadians come back, and several of them do have COVID. We see those numbers on a weekly or biweekly basis. But we didn't want to open up so that you would have families en masse going down to Arizona or Palm Springs or Florida for the March break that we're kind of in the middle of that season right now. So I don't see it happening probably until May, maybe June at this point, based on the Prime Minister's comment. But at a certain point, we do have to open up. But here's my fear, Hal. The Americans are going to be vaccinated long before we are fully vaccinated. They'll have that before we're done all getting one shot. What are the chances that instead of it being the Canadian government saying, yeah, we want to keep it closed, that it's the Americans this time saying, keep your COVID north of the 49th?
You know, it's interesting too. I mean, you're talking about spring break and heading down south, you know, when it's so cold. It's been so mild here in southwestern Alberta, 18, 19 degrees, no snow on the ground. So that's the blessing part. Brian, a Commons committee is studying the impact of pipeline Line 5 potentially shutting down. And it's not only bad news for Alberta's energy sector, but also not great news for Ontario and Quebec as well.
And I'm glad to see that all the parties at the committee are taking this seriously. The Conservatives have been pushing this issue for the last little while. And I remember complaining to you that at one point when Aaron O'Toole should have been asking about the lack of vaccines at the beginning of February, that he was asking Justin Trudeau about Line 5. And I said, people here don't even know that they get their oil from Line 5. They won't know until the pipeline is shut down, which could happen in May. And at that point, we don't need oil for heating our homes, but we will need it to drive our cars. So will we be able to get out of the city while we're still in lockdown? I'm sure we will be in Toronto come May. Will we be able to start our cars? Will there be gas? I don't know. Not if Gretchen Whitmer, the Michigan governor, has her way. She continues to insist that this pipeline, which is being worked on, they're building another tunnel for it. This pipeline that's been in place for more than 60 years. She says it's simply not safe. It's got to stop. It supplies a lot of the Upper Peninsula in Michigan. It supplies refineries and people with product throughout the Michigan and Indiana area. So she has to be worried for her own people as well. And I think this committee needs to find a way, in a nonpartisan way, to approach our American friends on both sides of the aisle down there, in state houses and at the White House and in Congress, to say, we need your help on this. This is not just an issue for us. This is not just an issue for Alberta oil workers. This is an issue for the entire Great Lakes Basin.
The Federal Conservative Convention is coming up, Ryan. Now, you recently wrote that you think some of the griping and coverage that party leader Erin O'Toole has been receiving is unfair. Why do you say that?
Look, Erin O'Toole has been accused by the Toronto Star of being in the pockets of SOCONs, and he's going to bring up all these social conservative issues, and he's not. He's been accused by some of the social conservative groups in their, like Campaign Life Coalition, in their emails of being a complete sellout and part of the swamp that needs to be drained. And I don't think that's fair either. Erin O'Toole has to walk a fine balance when it comes to this issue of social conservatives. He needs to make sure that they feel welcomed in the party, that they feel valued in the party. But having groups like Campaign Life Coalition lead the policy discussion or take over national council or be in charge, that would be a non-starter for an awful lot of the voters that the Conservatives need to win. And I'm not just talking swing voters or convincing Liberals to move over. There would be a large part of the Conservative faction that would walk away at that. So I think it's been overplayed, the degree to which this division is going to play out at the convention. I think the bigger threat that Erin O'Toole faces right now is if he adopts a carbon tax, because there are people pushing for the party to do that. And mark my words, if he does, Jay Hill will have more seats with his Maverick Party than Erin O'Toole does at the end of the next election. I do not see how that happens. He will lose all of his seats in Western Canada, maybe except some in lower mainland BC. He will lose the seats across the prairies if that goes through. So that's my biggest fear. The other gripe against Erin O'Toole is that he's not setting the world on fire. Let me put it to you this way, Hal. Justin Trudeau, despite the hundreds of billions he spent, a deficit bigger than the size of the budgets that he brought in just a couple of years ago, he's still in minority territory, and Erin O'Toole is still nipping at his heels. He's within striking distance. That is a good place for him to be, and it's a place that an awful lot of provincial opposition leaders would love to be, because whether we're talking about British Columbia, Saskatchewan, New Brunswick, they all went to an election and their leaders got bigger majorities. That would not happen based on the polling that we have right now for Justin Trudeau. Erin O'Toole would, well, he might be able to win in a campaign, but he would at least still be opposition leader, and there would be very little change going on if we went to the polls tomorrow.
Political reporter and one of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly with the Toronto Sun. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Hal.
Education about the dangers of impaired driving continues to increase, but yet the problem has not been solved yet. Joining me now to discuss this in greater detail is Anita Hushala. She's the president of the Lethbridge and area chapter of MAD, or Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Anita, welcome to Bridge City News.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
Now, Anita, before we get into the nuts and bolts of what MAD is all about, tell me about those amazing images behind you. Are those victims of drunk drivers?
They are victims and survivors. This is what we call our memory wall. And we take this to many of our events and show it on display. So it kind of is a hard message that hits home with many people to see the number of faces that we do have on our wall.
Now, can you explain the focus of your organization, Mothers Against Drunk Driving? What kinds of services do you offer specifically here in Southern Alberta?
Well, first and foremost, our mission is to stop impaired driving and support the victims of this violent crime. The services that our chapter can offer here in Southern Alberta are victim and survivor support, and that's first and foremost, like I said. So we can offer court accompaniment. We help them with their victim impact statement. We also answer many questions because going through the court process is very difficult, trying, and time consuming. We also offer youth services here. So we have different presentations that are geared towards elementary and the junior high, as well as the high schools, to also educate them on the dangers of consuming alcohol and or drugs, and then the dangers of getting behind the wheel during that. And then we also have several other things that we do. We have public awareness and education programs that are out there that we're always educating the public as to be aware of the dangers of drinking and driving.
Anita, how do you really console or comfort somebody whose family is the victim of a drunk driver, somebody who was killed, let's say a mother, a son, a daughter, an innocent child? We've seen that time and time again by a drunk driver. How do you console and comfort that family? What do you even say to them? Where do you begin?
There's really nothing right or wrong to say. Every situation is different. The best you can do is be there for that family. One of the first things that I do when I'm meeting a family for the first time is ask them to tell me about their loved one that they have lost. I want to hear about who they were. What did they mean to the community? What did they mean to the family? What kind of work did they do? And that way it puts it a little bit more of a personal curve on it. And it also helps offer us some information so we know how better to serve this family.
Let's also talk about the driver involved in this collision. Chances are that person is devastated on the inside. You know, they may face criminal charges on top of that, but they have to live with the fact that they killed another person with their vehicle.
Right. Right. That's also very difficult. We usually don't step forward to help them or anything like that because we are there for the victims of this. But there's several agencies here in the Southern Alberta area that can help counsel them to get through their grief as well, because it is very difficult. And it's not only difficult for the impaired driver, but it's also difficult for their families to have to realize that somebody in their family has chosen to get behind the wheel and has caused a crash.
So, Anita, where are we at in Canada? Have impaired driving incidents actually decreased? Are we improving at all?
I'd like to think personally that yes, we are improving. We're getting the message out there. We're getting more instruments for our police services to be using to help detect impaired drivers quicker and get them off the road. With the implementation of Bill 21 recently that just rolled out on December 1st, it does form some harsher penalties that the officers can be enforcing on impaired drivers.
Anita, do you have any stats whatsoever about how many people are killed or injured annually from impaired drivers?
From a MAT standpoint, with several years of research and statistics that we have, our odds are looking at on an average that 4 people are killed and 175 are injured every single day across Canada. And those numbers are absolutely staggering.
Now, we've talked about people who are drinking and driving. What about those who are maybe addicted to opioids or high on other drugs, methamphetamine, fentanyl, or anything else, who's also impaired when they get behind the wheel?
Correct. I think one of the firmest statements I can say is impaired. Whether you're taking the alcohol, whether you're taking the drugs, or even prescription drugs, we are seeing a rise at times in different age brackets of people who are prescribed opioids, whether it be from a surgery or a lengthy illness that they're dealing with and stuff, and they take that and then choose to get behind the wheel without realizing how impaired they may be. So I feel that it's always the best thing is to plan ahead. Plan ahead. Think about what your actions are and always plan ahead.
Anita, let's talk about the statistics involving female or women drivers getting behind the wheel while they're impaired.
We are seeing at times a number go up of women that are receiving opioid medication for a number of various conditions. And without even thinking, they're also getting behind the wheel, maybe to slip down to the mall to do a bit of shopping or slip out and get the groceries. And again, they're not realizing how they may be impaired with their driving. And it's an increase that we see not only just women, men are doing it as well. But because of this situation, our numbers are constantly changing with that. So we have to take into consideration the different medications that we can be taking that could be affecting us.
You know, I have seniors in my family who are suffering from painful conditions like fibromyalgia, osteoarthritis, and they take the opioids at the same time. They get behind the wheel, so they can be impaired too, is what you're saying.
Right, without possibly knowing it. It's a simple thing as when we have a cold or allergies. You know, there is drugs in there that can help or not help. They help the situation, but they also form impairment on us. And we may not be at our highest alertness that we need to be.
Now, you're right. A lot of that cold and cough and flu medicine, a lot of times is quite high in alcohol content. So you take that and you get behind the wheel, you're right, you're impaired. Anita, if I have a friend, a neighbor, or relative who drives impaired, what's the very first thing that I should do?
The very first thing is call 911. That is the first thing that you should do. Never ever confront the person, never try to stop them from getting behind the wheel. Call 911, take as much information as you can, and then assess the situation. You never ever want to put yourself in danger.
Now, we talked about driving while under the influence of alcohol or maybe opioids. What about the challenges of driving after using cannabis? Do you think Canadians are aware of the dangers of this?
I think there's been a great amount of education out there for us to learn from. They do recommend that you wait anywhere between 4 to 6 hours after consuming cannabis before you get behind the wheel. But I'd like to think that it's a same thing as when you're consuming alcohol. The best place to be is at home, and then consume whatever your choice is, and stay there instead of being out on the roads.
You know, what's really interesting as well is I've talked to police officers here in the city who say that a lot of people consume so much alcohol and then the next morning they think, oh, it's completely left my system, and they leave and go to work or they're out driving. It's still in their system depending upon how much alcohol, and they're still considered impaired. I guess we have to consider that as well, even the next morning.
Definitely. It's one of those things that you always need to make sure that you've allowed your body enough time to process either the drugs or the alcohol and have your system clear before you do get behind the wheel.
Can you remind viewers about planning ahead and how important that is to prevent impaired driving?
Yes, it definitely is. So like we always say, plan ahead. So that means that you can either call a taxi, call Uber, call a friend that is sober or a family member, or if at all possible, you can stay where you are. But if you don't have a plan before you go out and then you start to consume alcohol or drugs, you may not be making those best decisions. And then that's when we find people are getting into trouble. So that's why we always really enforce the plan ahead.
Is Mothers Against Drunk Driving Canada in need of volunteers? And if so, how does someone get involved?
Always. We're always looking for volunteers, whether you want to give an hour, a day, a lifetime, we'll take it all. The easiest way, we've just rolled out here lately, is that you can go online to mad.ca and choose volunteering, and then you can pick the region that you are in and then fill out the volunteer form online, and that comes directly, if you're doing it for the Lethbridge area, that comes directly to me, and then I can be in touch with you and we can take it from there.
What about 2021? Let's talk about some of the special plans that you have set up with MAD.
You bet. I'm always an optimist, so I'm really hoping that 2021 is always on, kind of the even keel, and we're back out there doing our regular events and stuff. We had rolled out a crash car this summer, and we did it. It's kind of like a roving billboard, so it is a crash vehicle that was not involved in an impaired crash, and on the side of it says, "Please don't drink and drive." And we'll be rolling that back out this spring at a few locations throughout southern Alberta as a reminder to not drive impaired, as well as we're really hoping, we're kind of in the planning stages, but we're really hoping that we're going to be getting back out there with all the different communities that surround us at these small parades and different events and stuff, so that we can be chatting with people, get them the red ribbons that they so want for their vehicles and stuff, and just continue to keep everybody educated and have them think twice before they make that decision to get behind the wheel.
Anita, we always hear the tragic stories involving drunk drivers and their victims. Let's talk about success stories, or maybe a feel-good story with Mothers Against Drunk Driving, maybe a story that you can share with our viewers.
I guess I try to think of, there was one classroom that I was doing a discussion in. There was a young girl in that classroom who really wasn't paying attention to our presentation. It was like she couldn't wait for us to kind of get it done and over with. And then I started to share a little bit more statistics and show some people that were closer to her age. And the principal of the school made the comment that he noticed that this young girl sat up in school and started to really pay attention to the talk I was giving. And when I was done, she came over and thanked me for sharing. And that right there really kind of warmed my heart, because I was hoping that our message got through to her. She'll think twice about this. And right there, we may have just saved a life without knowing it.
That's beautiful. You never know whose heart you're really going to touch. Isn't that right, Anita?
That's 100%. 100%.
Anita Hushala is the president of the Lethbridge area chapter of MAD, or Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Anita, keep up the great work, and God bless you.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks for watching.